I have trouble telling what's going to happen with the triggering of Article 50, what the timing is. Does it have to go through Parliament? I think the only thing that's certain is there's a lot of uncertainty hanging over the British economy. That can't be good for investment. It's going to make firms reluctant to hire as much as they would otherwise.
Our last guest, Richard Buxton, was pointing out just now that sterling has been very much the shock absorber, though, post-Brexit. Is that really the only thing that the UK economy has to protect it against further shocks like that?
Well, I mean, having the low value of sterling, if I understood you correctly, has certainly been a cushion against Brexit, and I think it's helped provide some growth, but maybe less than you might have hoped, that it takes time to reorient an export economy. And of course, if you're in the middle of thinking about pulling out a lot of your trade agreements, then that's going to discourage further investment into the export sector too. But yes, the low value of sterling's been very, very helpful. If not for that, I think the British economy would be performing much more poorly.
Now, following the financial crisis, you argued very, very forcefully that governments with big deficits had to get real about reducing those deficits. The US is a high deficit nation. It doesn't look like Donald Trump is going to particularly be too concerned about the deficit. Does that worry you at all?
Well, not with these levels of interest rates. I think it's not, such a problem. And let's not forget that in private debt, not looking at government debt, the U.S. has been pretty successful in bringing it down. So is the U.K., for that matter, which makes me less concerned about the rising public debt. But it depends on how you spend it. If he's spending it on useful infrastructure projects, spending it on education, I really think it should be pretty non-controversial. I think it will be. On the other hand, if it's just a giant tax cut for the wealthy, you get a higher deficit, and I don't think you get that much stimulus.
But do you think Donald Trump is going to be as positive for US growth as the markets seem to be assuming he will be?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly can make a case that backing off of some of the regulation that President Obama has done, which maybe was a little excessive in the last couple of years, the infrastructure investment that President Obama wanted, but President Trump's going to be able to get, and the tax cuts, even though they're not good for equality, might stimulate business investment. I do think he could be good for the economy. But on the other hand, I have no idea what he's going to do. He's completely unpredictable. If he starts going off on bashing the Chinese early on and causing problems in trade, that'll be bad. I think some of what the markets are happy about is simply lower regulation, lower taxes, even if there isn't more growth. But all in all, I do think we're going to see more growth in 2017, and I'm sure we're going to see more inflation.
What about China? We had some pretty positive manufacturing data out of China today. Are you encouraged by that? Is that a bit of a false dawn, or do you still fret about levels of debt in the Chinese economy?
Well, I think we can certainly fret about the Chinese economies, not simply that it's at the tail end of this big credit boom that's completely unsustainable, but also it's gone through this political revolution, a virtual Putinization of China, where the leadership's become much, much more centralized. It's very hard to run a fast-growing economy with such a centralized leadership. So I think China's a real ticking bomb in many ways. Its growth has been slowing down. Its growth could slow down more. If it weren't for Donald Trump, I would say China's the biggest risk in the global economy.
Now, you've got a book out at the moment, The Curse of Cash, where you're calling for large denomination banknotes to be phased out around the world. It hasn't. The Indians have just done it, and it led to chaos. Did they get it wrong?
They certainly got it wrong. My book argues just with getting rid of really big denominations. They didn't have any. Their biggest denomination was on the order of $15. My book argues for taking 5 to 7 years to do it. President Modi did it overnight. And then worst of all, he didn't have the new cash printed to replace the old cash. So I really don't understand what they were thinking. They cited a lot of the arguments from my book, The Curse of Cash, but I'm not sure their tactics and strategy are really hard to fathom. Lastly, my book says if you're a developing economy, don't try this at home. It's really for advanced economies that have extensive financial infrastructure. India lags.